So, some slightly kind of good news from the UK, finally. It seems like everything related to the NHS, every NHS story is nothing but horrible news. You know, the NHS killing babies, refusing to allow parents to take their baby out of the hospital and saying it has to die here, and all these horrible things that they seem to be doing. Finally, they've actually taken a decision that seems to be on the right track, at least, even if not completely a reversal of what they were doing, at least something that's more on the right track. So let's go through this article on what the NHS did. This was last week. The story is entitled England's Health Service Puts Brakes on Transgender Treatments for Children. And I want to actually make another video generally about, let's say, gender dysphoria and sexuality, because there are a number of interesting articles and there is a lot of research that's been done to suggest that we are essentially affecting infants when they're still in the womb, children when they're still in the womb, when they're developing. We're affecting their sexuality. We're sometimes affecting their brain in the sense that their brain develops and causes them to think that they're in the wrong body. All these kinds of things that are happening, caused by us, it seems. But that's for another video, because there's a lot of interesting stuff to say there. A lot of research is showing that basically, well, I'll go into it another time. Anyway, back to this. So England's health service puts brakes on transgender treatments for children. Thank the Lord. England's National Health Service, the NHS, has issued new guidance for the treatment of children with gender dysphoria, warning that the condition is often a temporary phase. They finally cottoned on to that. And restricting the use of puberty blockers and sex-changing hormones. The NHS's revised treatment policy was released last week after a review of existing policies found that gender transitioning may have significant effects on the child's psychological function. Gee whiz, who would have thought? The change follows the closing of what was the world's largest child gender clinic, Tavistock Clinic, due to concerns raised by an independent review and complaints from patient families. Apparently there were about 1,000 complaints, by the way, made about this clinic, who administered sex changes, and they had to close down. The NHS's full guidance represents a shift away from a gender-affirming care model that encourages the medical and social transition of a child into the opposite sex, often with the use of puberty blockers and hormone drugs. Instead, the new model is focused on child psychology and development and includes specialists on pediatric autism, neurodisability, and mental health. So yeah, finally they're going to actually get these professionals to talk to the children who believe that they are in the wrong body and want to change sex, and kind of try and talk them out of it. Because I was reading somewhere, I don't know if we're going to get to this in the article, that supposedly around 85% of children who believe that they are in the wrong body and want to change sex, they come out of that phase and they don't want that anymore. And if you go straight into it and say, okay, right, we're going to take care of that for you, let's start the process, and then you do it, and then later they decide, actually, no, I didn't want this, it's a bit more of a problem. As CNA has reported in the past, the link between autism and gender dysphoria suggests children on the spectrum are particularly vulnerable to the pull of transgenderism. The NHS states that its new care model for children is based on evidence that in most cases gender incongruence does not persist into adolescence and may be a transient phase. The majority of children, roughly 84% in some studies, so that was the figure close to what I was saying, are reported to get out of this gender dysphoria. So they come out of it. They have a moment, they have a phase where they think they want to change into the opposite sex, and then they... I mean, how many people did you know? That's where the phrase tomboy comes from with girls. I mean, I remember a girl in my primary school, she would always be playing with the boys, she'd be playing football with the boys, and she's now just still a girl, and she's quite happy to be a girl. She never said she wanted to be a boy. She just enjoyed doing stuff with the boys more than with the girls. And even if at that time she might have had feelings like perhaps she would rather be a boy, it could well be a phase. It most likely is a phase. Additionally, the NHS warns that social transition, when a child adopts a new name, haircut, and clothes to match the opposite sex, could have significant effects on a child's psychological functioning. The NHS emphasises that social transition should only be considered in cases of clinically significant distress. And again, I want to make another video talking about gender dysphoria, because it really could well be the case that there are indeed people, children, who feel they are in the wrong body, and that could be related to things that have happened to their brain in development. So it's not just that they're a bit wacky and young and stupid. They could actually be suffering from this. And again, that's why they need psychological help to get through it, rather than actually changing their sex. NHS's new guidelines come in response to criticism from practitioners who said it rushed people into medication. England is one of several European countries scaling back access to gender-affirming treatments and surgeries on minors. So it seems like while Europe appears to have gone crazy, some European countries are finally starting to roll back a bit on the crazy and decide, you know what, maybe we went a bit too far, to put it lightly. The new NHS model is in line with medical ethics and the best science we have. Sweden, Finland and France are also putting the brakes on child and adolescent transgender interventions. Dr. Michel Cretella, a Catholic pediatrician and past executive director of the American College of Pediatricians, told CNA. Cretella is also a board member of Advocates Protecting Children, that offers resources for parents and the lay public to learn the truth about transgenderism. This is exactly what America should do as well, Cretella added. England's ongoing review into the safety and efficacy of the gender-affirming model known as the Cass Review is led by Dr. Hilary Cass, who previously served as president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. In a letter to children in the review's interim report, Cass addressed the push to prescribe hormone treatments for those struggling with gender dysphoria. The topic that I know is worrying some of you is whether I will suggest that hormone treatments should be stopped. On this issue, I have to share my thoughts as a doctor, Cass wrote. We know quite a bit about hormone treatments, but there is still a lot we don't know about the long-term effects, she added. Following a period of public comment and months of review, the NHS new programme will be subject to a final review before going live by 2023-24. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pushback against it. There's going to be a lot of protesting. There's going to be a lot of activism suggesting this is an outrage, in the same way it was an outrage in the USA to give the states the right to decide whether abortion is illegal or not. Outrage! We're moving backwards into the Stone Age. It's going to be the same thing here, I suspect. Even though this whole thing is just a few years old, literally. It's suddenly become normal in the last few years. And yet if we move back on this, as it looks like the NHS is going to do, it's going to be considered an absolute outrage and we're moving back again. The NHS decision is a critically important step in the right direction because it recognises the lack of evidence to support the gender-affirming protocol, which endorses psychosocial transition, puberty blockers, hormones, and even surgery on minors. Mary Rice Hassan, director of the Person and Identity Project at the Ethics and Public Policy Centre, told CNA. Hassan said she was still concerned about the NHS's stated willingness to continue to permit some of these medical interventions in a research setting. And it says story continues below, so let's go further down. There's a heck of a lot of this, but I think it's good to actually read through the whole thing here in this particular case. The truth is that it is never the answer to block puberty or give cross-sex hormones as the answer to psychological distress about one's identity or body, she said. No one can change sex, so any attempt to embark down a medicalized path to alter a child's appearance and destroy or impair the body's natural function is unjustified. Warning about puberty blockers and hormones. Most significantly, the guidance says the NHS will stop prescribing controversial hormone drugs to children unless they are monitored by a formal research program that includes follow-up into adulthood. NHS England will only commission puberty blockers in the context of a formal research protocol. The research protocol will set out eligibility criteria for participation, the document says. The NHS explains that these stronger safeguards will ensure the children and their parents are provided greater transparency about uncertain clinical benefits and long-term health impacts from the use of puberty blockers and hormone treatments. This will further strengthen the consent, support, informed decision-making by young people. In young people, consideration also needs to be given to the impact on fertility, with the need for fertility counselling and preservation. The guidance also warns about the dangers of puberty blockers and masculinizing or feminizing hormones that young people may seek to purchase on the private market. If a child obtains unregulated puberty blockers or masculinizing and feminizing hormones, the NHS says it will not accept clinical responsibility. So, as I said, a step in the right direction. There's still suggestion in there that they're going to still go ahead with actually medically, physically transitioning people, but first they're going to go through various steps, almost like everything they can do, and that's going to be a last resort. It still should not be a last resort at all. Shouldn't be any resort. But as I said, it's a step in the right direction, and it's good that other countries in Europe are also following suit. So there we have it, folks. Some kind of positive news. It certainly needs to be looked at as positive news. And do look out for my video that I want to make soon, going a little bit more into detail into why some people might have gender dysphoria and why some people might have the sexualities they have. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. See you again soon.